So Japan is talking about something it hasn't had for, wow, over 80 years, a national anti-spy law. And as you can imagine, this proposal is really splitting the country right down the middle. It's forcing this huge choice between national security and personal freedom. So let's break down what's really at stake here.
So what are we really talking about with this proposed law? Is it, a necessary shield in today's world of cyber warfare and foreign interference? Or is it a dangerous weapon that could be turned against its own people? That right there, that's the high-stakes question we're going to dig into.
Okay, so first things first, let's set the stage a little. Why is this whole debate about a new spy law happening right now in Japan?
Well, what makes this so significant is that Japan is kind of the odd one out among its peers. You look at key allies like the US, the UK, Germany, even South Korea, they all have specific anti-espionage laws. So this gap in Japan's own legal playbook, that's become the absolute central issue of this whole debate.
Now, what's really interesting here is the kind of threat we're talking about today. The people who support this law, they argue that we're way past the era of just military conflict. The new battlefield is what's called this gray zone. This is where adversaries are targeting everything from super advanced technology in private companies all the way to public opinion itself. It's a whole different ballgame.
All right, so let's dig into the first side of this debate. This is the argument for taking action. The side that frames this law is a much-needed national shield.
So the folks who are for this, they frame it as just pure pragmatism. Their core argument is that modern threats, we're talking cyber attacks, intellectual property theft from private companies, have totally outpaced Japan's old laws. They say this vulnerability makes Japan an easy target. And they really insist that for now, this is only about starting a discussion to find a solution, not about rushing some flawed law into existence.
And this quote right here, it really captures their entire philosophy. For them, just talking about this law isn't some authoritarian power grab. No, they see it as the responsible, necessary first step to protect the country from some very real, very present dangers.
Okay, now for the flip side of the argument. This is the warning against overreach. The people on this side, they're worried this law could become a very dangerous double-edged sword. So their whole argument is centered on caution. A huge red flag for them is that the word espionage is just so vague. They're worried it could be used to target journalists or academics, and they point to Japan's pre-war history, specifically to the oppressive Public Security Preservation Law. I mean, this was a law infamous for being used to crush all political dissent, and they see that as a stark warning. Their position is, look, before you create a powerful new law, shouldn't you first try to improve the ones you already have?
And this quote, it just perfectly captures their core belief. For the opponents, they're saying that real national security comes from preserving the civil liberties that actually define a free society, even if that means moving a lot more cautiously.
So you see, the crucial point here is this fundamental disagreement on where the biggest risk really lies. Is it riskier to do nothing and stay vulnerable? Or is it riskier to act and potentially create a tool for state overreach? That's the heart of it.
Okay, so this brings us to the points where the two sides really directly clash, and it all boils down to three key questions.
First up, are the laws and tools Japan already has on the books really not enough to get the job done?
The affirmative side says, yes, absolutely, they are insufficient. They point to all these gaps that leave private companies and researchers totally exposed. But the negative side pushes back. They argue that the existing laws, things against theft or trespassing, they haven't been fully tested or upgraded for the digital age. It's like they're asking, why build a whole new house when you haven't even tried renovating the one you already live in?
All right, the second major disagreement is maybe even more fundamental. It's really about whether you can actually trust the political process to get this right.
Proponents argue, hey, the discussion phase is exactly where we can build in safeguards. But the opponents, they're skeptical. They look at past security laws and say, wait a minute, public concerns were often ignored, and we ended up with dangerously vague language in the final bills. So their question is simple and powerful. Why should we trust that this time will be any different?
And that leads us right to the third and probably the most sensitive point of contention, the long shadow of Japan's own history.
See, the affirmative side argues that comparing today's Japan to its pre-war state just isn't fair. They point to all the modern democratic checks and balances, like a free press and a constitution. But the negative side says the historical lesson isn't about an instant replay of the past. No, for them, it's a warning about the slow, gradual creep, the erosion of freedom that can happen under the banner of national security.
So, after we strip away all the arguments and the back and forth,
What is the fundamental choice that's facing Japan right now?
This really sums it all up, doesn't it? It's a clash between two completely different worldviews. The affirmative side's biggest fear is being vulnerable to external threats. For them, safety comes from creating new, clear laws. But the negative side's greatest fear is the state turning its power inward, against its own citizens. And for them, safety comes from protecting the democratic institutions we already have. So their calls to action are, as you can see, polar opposites.
Ultimately, this whole debate in Japan brings us to a question that isn't just about Japan, but about every free society. It's a question we all have to answer, over and over again. Where do you draw the line between being safe and being watched? At what point does the need to protect ourselves from outside threats cross over into the danger of being monitored by our own government? Finding that balance? Well, that's the unending challenge of any democracy, isn't it?